Can't hear it.
Can't hear music.
We should be live any moment.
But I can't hear the music.
Oh, you can't?
Nope.
No.
You might want to turn it up.
He can hear it.
Is it Pandora? Is it Alexa?
He's laughing.
Is it muted?
I finally paid for service, so I have no commercials. So
Yes!
we're live.
All right. Happy Wednesday, everyone. We're live. I didn't hear music, but okay. Yay. Cha, 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 cha.
I believe we are. Yes, we are live.
Yes,
All
we
right.
are.
I saw the little thing come up. Yeah.
I have a new computer, and I feel so high tech now with the monitor here and that side monitor. Where it's just I feel like a gamer. I was telling Steven, I said, now I see why people like game all night long. It's like this is the coolest thing in the world. Welcome everyone to Coffee and Pandusa. I'm Christian Cowan, one of your co-hosts. Today is Wednesday, March the 10th. Daylight.
The Sunday. Sunday.
Daylight. Is it
Saturday
savings
night.
or
Daylight savings time. Yep.
daylight savings time? Spring forward, fall back.
Spring.
Yep.
Yes. So we are, as I predicted, the groundhog was wrong, and we are having an early spring in Charlotte. So we didn't get any snow, which means skeeters and bugs, and ooh, it's going to be a fun spring.
yeah.
I'm
Doing
Christian
much better
Cowan.
than Texas.
Oh yeah, we got water, power.
Those final essentials. Yes.
Too soon, too soon. Welcome to who's watching us on Facebook Live, but also those who joined us later on YouTube and also on Facebook. We're going to go around the Brady Bunch screen so that way I can share us on my new technology. And if you're watching the Brady Bunch screen, anybody?
I'm trying.
This is where that other monitor is supposed to come in handy, but I don't move it to the other monitor. So we will
Next
find
week.
out. Oh, okay, so you know what? Let's go.
There we are.
Okay, go ahead.
We are.
Okay.
All right. So it's Stephen, then
Okay.
Jenny. No, actually, it's Stephen, Jenny, Dr. B, Barbara, myself, and
Shannon.
Miss
Lucille.
Kling,
Shannon.
Shannon Klug.
Klug.
Klug, it's long U.
Klug.
Yes.
All right, Miss Klug.
And then we do have Lucille Puckett, who's just joined us. So, all right,
Yeah.
if you remember where you are, let's go.
All right, my name is Stephen DiFiore. I'm the recording secretary for the Mecklenburg County Libertarian Party. I'm a longtime awesome guest of this show. My buttons, well, let me get my screen back up. My buttons are end qualified immunity and end certificate of need.
Mm.
And
Good
that's
morning,
it.
Oh,
Oh,
Good
sorry.
morning,
Back to you guys.
all right. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jenny James Gunn, and I'm a Charlotte Pride coordinator for 2 different divisions, and I'm also a board member of the National Organization of Women. And this topic interests me so much because it's got my last name involved, and I got my little gun shirt or dress on. And but anyway, I will send it over to the next person.
I'm George Bohmfalk. I'm a retired physician. My number 1 button is Medicare for All. My second, taken up in the past year, is Black Lives Matter. And I'm proud to announce that the first protest march I ever participated in was a couple of years ago, and it was a Moms Demand Action march uptown.
Ooh,
It's the first time I've
Wow.
ever marched. It was very invigorating, and I was on a huge campaign. This is before I got involved in Medicare for All, before Black Lives Matter happened. And so I was on a big campaign with handgun, diminishing handgun violence. So I would say that's my third equally important button.
Hi, good morning. I'm Barb Bacon, and I'm a healthcare advocate here in South Charlotte. My buttons are, I could say healthcare for all and stop gun violence. We've had an incident in my family lately, so it scared me enough to really get involved in this and see what else I can do. But, and then I'm also being a chauffeur for several neighbors that are going to have their second vaccination this week. They're very excited. And then I have another neighbor that's had a knee replacement, so I guess that's another part-time job for me. Thank you.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Everybody here in the show calls me Mama Ruth. My name is Ruth Perez. I'm a community advocate. I'm also a co-host for Coffee and Pan Dulce, going on almost 3 years, I think, or fourth. I can't even remember. I lost the count. I am proud to be a part of it's called Charlotte Community Health Clinic. I'm one of the board members. We provide service to the uninsured communities, all these families. So of course, one of my buttons is Medicare for All. We want to make sure that everybody has the same level of treatment and, for medical services. I'm also an advocate for mediator for the court system through our Charlotte Housing and communities. I'm also part of the youth action of violence, early teenage relationships and violence. And as y'all know, I've always support and want to see a change on the gun violence. We need some gun reform, sense reform. We have a lot of kids, a lot of teens, a lot of lives that are living this world without fulfilling their own goals. So I'm happy to be here. Next, Miss Klug.
Klug, yeah. Good morning. I'm Shannon Klug, and I guess my one big button would be gun violence prevention. I am a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, 24 years, and upon retirement, really got involved in this movement. So I joined, Christian with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. So I'm a grassroots volunteer there. But through that organization, I got involved with one called Be Smart, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. And Be Smart is the public education campaign that really works to educate adults on how to keep children safe and how to reduce gun violence in the home and in everywhere, honestly. And through that program, I've also gotten involved with the Everytown Veteran Advisory Council, so kind of working also on veteran suicide and by firearm and some of those veterans issues. Thank you.
Ms. Puckett?
Yeah.
Lucille, I'm not sure if you're able to introduce yourself, or we can.
I am. I'm actually driving, so you might hear noise. But again, my name is Lucille Puckett. I have an organization called Take Back Our Hoods. I started this organization after my son was murdered in March of 2016. Come March the 22nd, it will be 5 years for me. So, of course, working with ending gun violence. I'm a member of the NAACP. I'm a member with I work with Stop Killing Our Children. I'm a community activist. Work with housing situations, juvenile delinquency, a court advocate. Because we have a lot of people who cannot afford attorneys, but have real legal situations and don't know which way to go, have nobody to really turn to for answers. I've been told that if they hear my name in the courts again, that a judge told them that they would cite me for practicing law without a license. But I feel that if I can help someone save themselves in their situation, not become homeless, not lose their children, whatever the legal situation may be, I'll take that risk. So whatever the need may be out here in the city of Charlotte, you can probably see on it. I would just love to see qualified immunity done away with, because I am so sick and tired of police officers who are able to legally kill our Black and brown people, and they say that it's justified. They need to be held accountable, just like Black on Black crimes, white on white, and other race of people. So that's pretty much just a little bit about Lucille.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us. None of us get paid to do this. This is something that we do for the community. As Mama Ruth has said, almost going on 2.5, 3 years. every week. It's like 126th show. I think I've done this more consistently than I ever went to church. So this is something that my grandmother would be so upset at, I guess. I'm not sure which way or the other. But as Mama Ruth suggested, we need to salute to coffee and Pandusi, as we always do. If you have something you're drinking this morning, please salute to your neighbor, like we did back in the pre-COVID days around this table. Also, we do want to thank Manolo's Bakery, our Pandusi sponsor. More wonderful Pandusi, which is sweetbread. Manolo's Bakeries on Central Avenue. Please remember to support your Black and brown small businesses in Charlotte or wherever you're watching us, or any small business during this global pandemic. And wear a mask when you walk in, please. So wear a mask. This is a mask show. So, all right. Today's, I don't know how to word that one. Today's show is America's Gun Violence Epidemic. We have been talking about this since Shannon was on the show about a year ago. It may have been over a year ago, or maybe even more. I think it was maybe 2019 when you were on the show. That was
2019, yeah.
Yes, and we talked about the Be Smart program. We talked about, and I learned so much, like checking if you have children or someone's going over to someone's house, just like you do. Do you have a dog? Any allergies or things like that? Checking. Do you have guns in the house? You know, those kind of basic things that I don't think maybe some people didn't think to think of. And so, you know, but since then we have been talking about this because of it's an epidemic. I mean, in my view, it's an epidemic. But what's interesting is when I was doing the research for the show and printing things out that we do every week, I realized it happens so much that, do you think that people are it's just something that people have made a decision that this is just what we deal with? I mean, I guess we should start off with that in 30 seconds or less, because we have a lot of people on today. Let's go around and tell us what you think about America's gun violence epidemic. You know, who wants to go first? Or
Hello.
Okay.
I'm dead set against it. People that have guns should learn how to take care of them and what to do with them, and keep them away from children, but they're fascinated by them. And I guess I get that because it's child curiosity, but the things that you talked about, Shannon, when you came to the show, talked to this family friend and I'm like, what is the matter with you? You have 3 kids and you leave a gun out? Are you insane? You know, it's like, oh, they could take her kids away from her. You know, I don't understand it. I mean, kids are your most important thing in your life, and you don't protect them. I don't understand that.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick.
Yep.
So it's funny when you said you don't ask, you have a dog or allergies, or you have a gun in the home if you're going over. I've always, because I grew up in more of a rural, kind of a conservative area of the country, I always just presume that there's a gun in the house. And then when I find out that someone doesn't own a gun, for me, it's like, well, that's weird. Why don't you? Kind of thing. Now, I will say this. I do think that many gun owners could use a lot more training, and there should be more of an air of respect around firearms, because while ownership thereof is a right, all rights have incumbent responsibilities. I've been injured because someone was using a firearm irresponsibly, and it's very, very annoying. I will say that, to put it lightly. And so more of a cultural push, and it's on people like me as gun owners to put that out there and try to advocate for people to be more responsible. Using the power of culture, the power of conversation, we can make sure that people exercise their rights in a more responsible way and mitigate some of the risks that come with having a dangerous object. We are taught to drive responsibly, because if you don't, you can hurt people. We're taught to behave in public in a responsible manner, right? So same thing with firearms. And I think having a cultural pressure of education and responsibility and respect will go a long way to improve that circumstance and improve that situation. And there are a number of organizations, we can talk about this later on the show, that seek to do that.
Anybody else want to jump in? Dr. B?
Yeah, I'm very skeptical about the upside potential for the better angels of individuals to make these decisions and educate themselves. We had a problem with motor vehicle deaths 30, 40 years ago, or people dying right and left. And so, the government, I'm sorry, decided to take a look at it. And they appointed all sorts of commissions to study motor vehicle deaths, and they came up with recommendations, and some of those recommendations became laws and regulations like seat belts and design of dashboards and brakes and blah, blah, blah. And now we have all these kind of things. And if you look at the chart of motor vehicle deaths in the last 20, 30 years, it is plummeted. It is absolutely plummeted. And I think there's no reason why we can't do the same thing with handgun violence, other than the fact that the NRA has had so much of Congress in such a thrall that they're afraid to say, let's even study it. And so I think declaring that handgun violence is a public health issue that needs to be looked at and see kind of what ideas we might kind of come up with doesn't mean we're going to go away and take everybody's guns away. There's this paranoia about that, but we can look at it just in the same way that, we can look at, talk about things like reparations and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's a very much a medical issue. It is in the healthcare lane, and so I think if we have some national study and come up with some recommendations, I'm confident that just like we still have cars and people have to have licenses and follow some rules to have cars. But nobody's taking cars away. I think we can do the same thing with guns and cut down on handgun violence.
Jenny, you're from Texas.
And I just want to
Lucille, go ahead.
Yes, and I just want to add, it's not I don't think it's the legal guns that's the issue. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. And when the doctors say it's a health issue, I think it's more like a mental health issue or something, because people hurt people. And unless we get into the minds of these sick people who is pulling these triggers, we will never get to the bottom, to the root of, ending gun violence. People need to have.
We lost you.
I was just going to get.
Know how to handle their anger and different issues, because we don't see where illegal guns, when we talk about the laws of guns, we talk about our legislation with the NRA. If we cannot regulate guns, then we need to see about regulating the bullets, because without bullets, a gun cannot shoot and a gun cannot kill people. So if we look into even putting a regulation on bullets, before my son was murdered, I used to tell my son, you don't need a gun, because if you're carrying a gun, you're looking for trouble. Not only by other Black people, because when people carry guns, it's like it put an S on their chest, like they feel like they Superman or something, and study walking away, then they feel like, okay, I could just pull the trigger and my problems will be over. No, your problems would just be beginning. But since I lost my son, I went through the protocol of going and getting a permit, going and getting a seal carry, going to the gun range, doing all the legal things that I now be able to protect myself and my family. Because losing my son, that's one of the regrets that I have, is telling him not to have a gun, because I feel like if my son would have had a gun the night that he was murdered, he would have been able to protect himself as well as his family, because I was out there when my son was murdered and was also shot at. And the situation could have been totally different.
Lucille, I'm totally sorry for your loss. I wasn't aware of that. That's tragic, and nobody should have to deal with that. I completely agree with you about that's one aspect of dealing with the problem, but that doesn't address so many of the folks that commit suicides, which is the largest number of victims of gun violence in the country, and children. I mean, there's just so many stories every single day of children. Somebody mentioned, Barbara mentioned their fascination getting a gun and either killing themselves or a parent. And so we need a little bit more than mental health, but that is a huge aspect of it. I completely agree.
Well, of course, gun locks, because a couple of weeks ago, a girlfriend of mine, she had a gun in her purse, and her child got the gun. And before she can get the gun from him, she was actually killed by that gun. So, you're exactly right in reference to being able to, it's hard for us in, I guess, any community, but in say the African American community, you think that, okay, you put a gun lock on a gun, but if someone come into your house or someone comes to assault you, you have to get the gun out of the gun safe or get the gun, unlock the gun. I mean, and put the, loaded and all that kind of stuff before you can. By that time, you be dead already. So, I mean, parents is not thinking, that far ahead, that this was a tragic situation. And not only, like you said, kids killing. A couple of weeks ago, and I work a lot with gun violence victims. A couple of months ago, we had a 14-year-old that got a hold to a gun and killed his 5-year-old sister. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. And education, to parents and to also our children, because they're fascinated by it. Yep. When you look at these video games, or you have these parents who buying water guns or these kind of play guns, they're not connecting the dot, because when they shooting these play guns, people get up. They don't get up with a real gun. So we need to, education is, very important, very, very, very important.
And that should be incorporated into our school system. We should have volunteers or people like Lucille, like Miss Shannon, going and opening programs or allowing them to open programs on education. Because, we have the stores full of plastic guns, and kids, especially boys, are growing up thinking what they see on TV, and they want to become heroes as well. But they don't know the difference between a real gun and a plastic gun or a BB gun. And then the parents, they think it's fun. Oh, he's a male. He's a macho man. He needs a gun to protect himself. But they don't realize that they're instructing them at an early age to become something terrible down the road. So we have to connect all those dots together in our community. It's not only their parents, it also starts in the education. They should open a separate chapter of education in gun sense, in gun violence, and the difference.
Or just even civics in general.
Yeah, well, Mama Ruth, you said something very important, and ironically, Shannon is here. I know she'll be talking about some of that in a little bit. Before we jump to Shannon, Jenny, you're from Texas, and those of us, almost a lot of everyone.
I'm from Texas too.
Yeah, Dr. B, Barbara's lived there. Stephen probably has it. Shannon, I'm not sure if you've ever lived in Texas. Okay, so
visited.
Let me let Jenny have something to say. Then I want to piggyback on what you said, Mama Ruth, as a little boy who played with play guns. So our little child, Jenny.
Just real quick, there's a couple things that I think, and I had this conversation with Kyle Kirby, which also he's a licensed gun broker, and that's what he does for a living. And we talked about this about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And one of the most important things is that there is a lot of limits on what a gun broker can do. If they were able to increase the scope of what a gun broker can do, they're trained, they're bond, they're licensed. And if they were to outlaw private person-to-person gun sales without going through at least a gun broker to be the middle person in this and kind of vet the next owner, make sure that they do have the background check. But this private to private, these private gun sales gives you, in the car business, and I'll use this as an example, in the automotive industry, we're bonded and licensed to resell cars. And part of that process is making sure the gun's not stolen, or the car is not stolen, it's not been in a wreck, it's not been flood damage. So there's a lot of value to that. The same way with gun brokers, they can eliminate or at least filter people that maybe show up and are drunk when they're buying the gun, or have some obviously issues. If they have hairs in the back of their neck standing up, Kyle said many times, I've refused to sell guns to people for various reasons. And I think it's just an extra layer that already exists that we wouldn't have to necessarily change the laws to match, but it would be a common sense step. So a lot of this is just common sense. I think the other thing is that, and several people have said it, is mental health. It is the most ignored health crisis in the United States. Suicide affects veterans and the transgender community disproportionately. We're the two highest categories in any socioeconomic class, and we've failed our veterans. And one, because we've had 2 decades of war with no break, and two, we just don't invest in the mental health the way we should. And I think those two first common sense steps is one, when you identify any problem, figure out the source. Just like with a medical, if your chest is hurting and this is hurting, doctors run tests and they run all of these diagnostics to figure out the source. Well, let's go to the source, which a lot of it is mental health, it's education, and it is a lack. There's some gaps in the oversight that if the ATF would just change a few rules, like being able to run a gun serial number for brokers. Gun brokers can't run the serial number to know if it's stolen or not. So they can literally resell a stolen gun and not know it. Just little common sense fine tuning things would make a huge difference.
Everyone touched on different things, and I don't know if anyone that highlights the challenge that we face is that common sense for all of us is almost different. I mean, so when we hear politicians say common sense solutions for gun, this is, well, that could mean if you live in a rural area, that could mean something different than if you live in an urban area, or even your family dynamics. And I was just going to comment on what Mama Ruth said. I grew up as a little boy playing with guns, playing cowboy and I don't want to, Native American, I don't know how to word that properly, playing those things, playing army. My grandfather's World War II veteran. We actually had empty grenades that we would throw around, real grenades that were emptied from World War II. And we would do all those things, but I didn't grow up owning a gun. We were also taught it's dangerous, so I never fantasized about owning a gun. We have family members that are gun owners, and we have a family member who's a gun collector. When I have visited them and visit their gun safe, everything is, I'm taught this is how you hold it. You always assume it's loaded. And, I've been to the firing range with someone firing the gun. It's exciting, like, oh, this is really neat, but I have no need. I thought about maybe purchasing a gun this year in 2020 with all the stuff that was going on, but then we made the decision just to get a boxer. So get a dog that barks a lot for our safety and camping. And so, everyone has difference in guns. I don't know if that has something to do with just my family's experience. My dad's oldest brother, and I shared this, I think, on our show when Shannon was on, I can't remember, when he was in high school, was going through some challenges in his life, and came home and found his dad's gun and committed suicide. And so that has impacted our family. And I wasn't even born then, but obviously that story has impacted us because my grandmother found him when she was coming home. So we've just been a culture of not owning guns in our family. And so, but I have family members that have guns and stuff. But what you were talking, what everyone was talking about was like gun. I do hear some commonality about gun education, teaching people how responsibly, which is why I think the organization like Moms Demand Action has been very beneficial for many people, especially for me, just educating yourself. I don't know that Moms Demand Action is at all fighting to take anyone's guns away. That's like this, I don't know anybody any elected official who actually wants to take it. Maybe there are some, but 99.9% of people are just saying, let's just have safer things. But let's have Ms. Shannon, I hope you don't mind me calling you that. I do know how to pronounce. So,
no, Shannon, I'm very comfortable.
Yes.
Wow, like this panel is amazing because you guys have brought up so many different, just a variety of things around the topic of gun violence prevention. And I got to tell you, I'm feeling very, very positive in 2021 about the movement in reducing gun violence. But if I can kind of address, I took notes because I'm a note taker, one by one. So Barb made a great point that kids are curious, right? And so we believe, and what we teach through Be Smart is that it's not a curious child's responsibility not to touch a gun. It's the adult's responsibility to deny access to that gun. Because they have done a study that where they put, I think I told you this in my last time, they put kids in a room with a gun, and half of these kids had a week-long training about, like, don't touch a gun. If you see a gun, go tell an adult. They'd had all this gun safety training. Half the kids had zero training. But when put in a room with a toy gun on a table, all the kids wanted to play with the gun. So you can't teach them not. It's a curiosity thing. So that's why we feel it's really the adult's responsibility to keep it locked, to keep it unloaded, and away from the children. And hiding a gun is not securing a gun, because kids are crafty, and if they can find those Christmas presents that you hid in the house, they're going to find the gun. So great point there. And then Stephen, one of the things we were really trying to do is a culture change, and he talked about that, like, no matter where you're from, you have a different experience with weapons, and right. So if you grew up in a rural community or any sort of community where you saw a lot of guns and it was normal, we can normalize those conversations about safety, right? And, there's just so much to do to model responsible behavior around guns. As Christian said, nobody's trying to get rid of the Second Amendment. Removing an amendment from the Constitution is nearly impossible. But what we really can do is change the culture that we have around guns. And it could be things, one of the things we're working with the veteran community, because they have a lot more access to guns than civilians and have had a lot more experience with them. And they are at a rate of about 60% more likely to engage in firearm suicide than any other means. But to kind of employ what we've done with drunk driving, like the take your keys effort, like, hey, man, so you've had too much to drink. I'm going to take your keys tonight. I'm going to get you a ride home. And when you're safe again, you'll get your car keys back. But to do the same thing with firearms. So this would be kind of like the peer-to-peer red flag law, or our extreme risk protection order, where you say, we don't have to get any legal people involved or law enforcement, but just say, look, man, I know you're going through a hard time. You're in a crisis. Let me hold your guns for you. Let me take them, let me lock them up. And then when we can get you help, through whatever crisis, because I think that we've all learned through life that, like, we're all going to have a mental health crisis at some point. And I think in 2020, the world all had it together, right? We're all in crisis together. So just removing access to a lethal weapon saves lives when it comes to suicide prevention. And then Dr. B, you made some great points too about just what we can do for common sense regulations. Like, and we have done all that, like you mentioned, with cars. And I always use that as an example as well, in terms of registration. And you have to be trained to drive a car. We put our kids through quite a bit of training before we hand the keys over. And there's no reason why we couldn't also do that with firearms. But the other point too is that with motor vehicles, they did, as you say, do a lot of studies. And so what I'm happy about now is that they've lifted the restriction on the CDC to study gun violence. So previously, there had been a restriction. So all of the studies that had been done in the last 20 years have been done by private organizations. But now the government can start funding that. And I do believe that once the government starts funding these studies, we're going to see some action. And phone was ringing there. I was very pleased to see just recently in 2021, the Surgeon General released a report on, it's the National Call to Action for Suicide Prevention. And in that report, the third call to action addresses firearms. And I just think that's the first time I have seen a government report that directly links firearms and suicide as being a bad mix, right? And so their third chapter is ensuring lethal means safety. Before that, I had not seen it always, that direct correlation. So that brings me hope that there's going to be change on the government side there. And then Ruth, I know I totally am with you. I think we need to educate kids, but we got to be careful about how we do it. Because like we talked earlier, you can't tell a curious kid not to touch a gun. But there is an effort that's Sandy Hook Promise Foundation is putting forward. And they're a neat organization in the kind of realm of gun violence prevention because they take a kind of different angle. And theirs is more along the mental health angle and what can we do to look for the warning signs. And so they've got a program that I was working with prior to the pandemic, where I was going into schools and teaching the students at the middle school and high school level about their Say Something anonymous reporting system. So Sandy Hook Promise, their mission is to educate 26 million kids by 2026. And they believe that would be a culture change in our nation. So if we can educate that generation of Americans, our children, our teens and middle schoolers, to look for the signs, right? So that if they recognize the signs within themselves and amongst their peers of kids that might have suicidal ideations or having trouble with bullying, or maybe they're cutting, those sorts of things. And it teaches them, you're not narking by bringing this to the attention of a trusted adult, that you're really bringing help to that person. And so they've got a really kind of neat system that they're putting in some of the school systems around North Carolina. It's a little app on the phone. You know, kids are really good with phone apps. And it allows them to anonymously report if they have a suspicion that a friend or a peer is under some sort of mental stress or has maybe made some sort of threats about, bringing a gun to school or something like that. And then the Sandy Hook Promise Foundation gets that and then triages it, basically looks to see how serious is this threat and who do we need to involve? Do we need to just go talk to the school principal? Do we need to get mental health counselors involved? Or do we need to take it to the level of law enforcement? And there have been a lot of successes with the school systems that have been using their program, not only in North Carolina, but around the nation. And then Jenny, so wow, you hit the nail on the head. There's some simple things that we can do with the sales of firearms. And you're right, like the ATF, without passing any laws, the ATF can simply change the wording in some of their regulations. And some of it has honestly been undone by the NRA, but I feel strong with the Biden administration that they can put some of those regulations back in about point-to-point sales. And here's where I need to put my plug in to call your congressperson about HR 8. So the Universal Background Check bill is up again in front of Congress, and the House passed it in 2020, but of course the Senate wouldn't even look at it. So the Universal Background Check bill is important because of what Jenny mentioned, is that it underpins all of the other gun sense legislation. So if we have universal background checks for every state, that means we're all safer. Because the way the system is now, even though you have to do a background check in North Carolina, if you don't in South Carolina, then all the illegal guns come through South Carolina, right? And that's why Chicago has a problem, because all the guns are coming through Indiana, which has a really lax system. But if we do universal background checks, that's like the foundational. So there's a statement I'd love to hear more.
The NICS system is in every single state in the union, and every gun purchase has to be passed and approved by the NICS system, which is a statewide, all 50 states, federally mandated background check system. So that's not actually an accurate statement.
Guns. But not for point-to-point sales between neighbors or at a gun show. So if we had a universal background check, then we could force a point-to-point
to sell a gun at a gun show. You have to be an FFL, which is a licensed federal firearms dealer. You have to be that in every single gun show in every single state. So that's actually false as well.
But I think I understand. I don't know. I can just tell you from just my experience managing hotels. Some of the hotels that I've managed and that we have companies that I've worked for have been convention hotels by convention centers. And I said this the last time, the last hotel I managed was in Allen, Texas. Next to it was the Allen Convention Center. When I walked out of my hotel to my parking lot, in order for me to walk into the gun show, I had to pay $10 and you could buy a gun or whatever. but there was no restriction for someone just in the parking lot to sell me a gun. They didn't even have to ask for identification to sell me a gun because it's a private sale. So that was, I didn't know that was the gun show loophole. I don't know if that's what they call that or whatever.
It's just a parking lot, because you can do that in any parking lot. You can do that in people's homes. And how do you regulate that?
Yeah. Well,
like,
I think
that's an honest and real question, right? So
Yeah.
we do have a universal background check system for legal gun purchases, you know, in gun stores, at gun shows, you know, by an FFL. But if you're just going to have a transfer of a firearm between two people in like my own home or your home, how do you regulate that? There's no practical means to do that. There just
I disagree. I disagree. If all sales have to have the serial number traced and vetted, and there's not a universal system for that gun dealers have access to. So one correction is, and this actually came from Kyle, not me, is that if gun dealers had an access the way VIN numbers are accessed by a car dealership, you would be, by law, if you even do a person-to-person sale, but it must be run through the VIN system, it forces you to go through a licensed and bonded and insured gun dealer. And these parking lot deals, if they happen and that gun turns up in any way, shape, or form, and it hasn't gone through a gun dealer, somebody hasn't touched it, and it's not in the system, the person that owns that gun, undocumented, would definitely face penalties, you know. And so it would give a chilling effect to gun sales. It would take a lot of the fun out of it, and quite frankly, it would put the regulation in the proper hands. Gun dealers go through a lot of hoops to be a gun dealer, and they're usually fairly responsible. And so,
I agree. FFL should have more leeway and more discretion to be able to control and vet their customers. I absolutely think that's a fantastic idea. But I mean, having these extra restrictions, that for us law-abiding folk, that's great, man. We'll jump through those hoops. But I mean, non-law-abiding people, like, these are the people we're really talking about. If we're talking about controlling guns, you know, if we want to talk about, for example, suicide prevention, like that's a whole nother can of a whole nother ball of wax, because like the numbers of firearms death, if you look at any statistic, right, you know, firearms deaths is like 26,000 people a year, but like almost 20,000 of those a year are suicides. So you cut down on that suicide number, like the gun deaths in the United States are super, super low. You know, even, I mean, it's ridiculous.
The most,
but that's a whole different like metric. Like you have to tackle that in a different way.
But they
because
both
the percentages
are together.
the percentages break down. Yeah, I mean, the percentages break down. So out of every 100 gun deaths, 60 of them are by suicide, 37 of them are by murder, and 3% of it is just, they just list as other. So I
usually accidents.
You know, suicide is, you know, of course, then that's getting you back to mental health. That's getting you back to accidental suicides, you know, that sort of thing. There's a lot of things to cover there. But yeah, in 2017, 39,773 people died by firearms in this country.
So what I'm hearing from Stephen, and then I want to jump back to Shannon, and then maybe you can just briefly tell us about the Be Smart program, because this is a lot to talk about, you know.
It's a big issue.
Yeah, and Americans have been talking about this for a long time.
In 1776.
That's right. What I'm hearing from Stephen is there's a little bit of pushback on requiring individuals to have to register a gun if they sell it. Is that pretty much?
It's not really pushback. There's just no way to enforce it.
Okay. Well, if there was, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot.
So that means that it is not national wide then, because you know, I've known people that go to South Carolina to get their criminal record run and everything, because it's much easier to buy one gun down there than in North Carolina.
Well, that's illegal. They're breaking the law.
Well, why?
That's already against the law.
But
Yeah.
see, they're running their criminal record.
But here's the thing: if you live in
Yeah.
North Carolina and you go to, like, for example, because I buy guns, right? So if I go to Nichols store, which is in it's down in South Carolina by Rock Hill, just south of Rock Hill, right? So I go there, I say, hey, I want to buy that rifle, or hey, I want to buy that pistol, or whatever. Cool. They'll take my information, they'll run my information through the NICS system. I cannot take possession of that firearm in South Carolina. I cannot. It has to be sent and transferred to a gun store in North Carolina. So let's say Carolina Sporting Arms in South Boulevard. So then I have to go to Carolina Sporting Arms in South Boulevard, and they'll run my numbers again. And then I can take possession of it in the state in which I live. Now, here's the thing. Let's say I live in New York and I'm visiting North Carolina. If I want to buy a gun that's legal to own in North Carolina, but I live in New York, I cannot take possession of a gun that's illegal to own in New York. I cannot, right? I can buy, like, a bolt action rifle in, like, down here, and then go back home and pick it up in New York at the registered firearms dealer, unless I live in New York City, in which I can't do it at all, right? But if, like, I live in upstate, I can. But I can't buy, let's say an AR-15, because those are illegal in New York. So I could come down to North Carolina, where you can own an AR-15, say, I want to buy an AR-15. They'll run my numbers. You're good. They go to transfer it to the store in New York and go, oh, wait, AR-15s are illegal to own in New York, so you can't have it. Here's your money back. Like, you can't do it legally. Like, the only way to do it, to get around that, is to just buy a gun illegally. Like, that's the only way to do it. Like, and I don't mean to be mean, but this is disinformation. These are lies that people, either just because they don't know, because they aren't in the, like, they don't do pro Second Amendment advocacy. They aren't gun owners. They don't want to be responsible gun owners, right? So they're just like, and all they hear are anti-gun rhetoric, and they don't know how it actually works, right? So you cannot buy, like, if a certain kind of gun is illegal in the state where you live, there's no way to buy it legally in the United States. There just isn't. And anyone who tells you that is either misinformed or being purposefully deceptive.
Well, that's a lot to pack in. And
that being said, I think focusing on mental health would really cut down on the suicide rate, and fostering a culture of education and respect would do a lot of good in reducing gun violence. And I'm all about that.
No, I agree with you, Stephen. And I think kind of what I don't want to speak for Shannon, but I don't want to speak for anybody else. But I think, like many other complicated issues in America, there are people who come from it from a different angle. And I think everyone's objective is going to be to educate people as much as they can on things, and then the communities will make decisions on what they feel is best for their communities. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Stephen, but I mean, like me, like when we talk about common sense solutions, to me, if you have a car and you sell it to your neighbor and you have to go and sign the title over to your car, why don't you have to do that with a gun? I mean, to me, that's just what's the, other than it makes you a little bit more inconvenient, So as a community member, I'm like, that's fine. If it means that a person who has to buy a gun has to wait a couple of days before they take ownership of the gun, so they don't take it immediately and do some harm, I'm fine with that. I don't think, and so for me, that's something that I don't think that's taken anyone's rights away or anything like that. But but I don't know. I hear what you're saying, because let's jump to be smart, because that's really,
I want to hear about Be Smart. I'm sorry to be such a curmudgeon.
But no. I was impressed it went that long.
I'm sorry. I mean, full disclosure, as a libertarian, I am opposed to all gun control. But this is about talking to our viewers about a point of view and expressing different points of view. So I want to hear about Shannon's thing. Sorry, Shannon, I'll be quiet now. I'm so sorry.
Yes, because Jeff Scott only went 30 seconds the last time she was with us, so it was.
Oh boy.
So Stephen, I respect your position, and I'm a gun owner too, and I really would love to get more gun owners like you, because you explained very well the legal process for buying guns across state lines. And I think people need to understand that. There is another topic maybe for a different day where we talk about what do we do with the illegal gun sales, like the stuff that's happening on armslist.com, you know, where there's 1.2 million ads in 2 years that would not need a background check. But anyways, so be smart.
Or the Fast and Furious program.
Yeah. So, and then another one that we can talk about, another one is the where you can buy the different parts, the ghost guns. So that's another issue altogether. But so be smart.
Oh yeah,
like I
ghost
mentioned.
guns are awesome.
So SMART is an acronym that they devised to help people remember. So for the S would be for secure weapons. And so, you know, like we talked about before, weapons need to be secured, locked, and unloaded and separate from ammunition. I've worked with Larry Hyatt at Hyatt Guns, and he has given me some free gun locks. He hands out like the free cable locks with all his gun purchases. He'll give out the Be Smart postcards to remind people about the program. But also to Lucille's point too, there are some fantastic gun boxes, and I've got a lock box. It has 4 like buttons across the top that I can hit just my code really quick. It literally pops open and I can have access to the handgun in literally seconds, like faster than I could rifle through a drawer to find a gun. And so it's solutions like that I think people need to really consider. And, you know, talking to Sheriff McFadden, also like, if you just lock it in your car, like there are so many guns stolen out of cars here in Charlotte, it's disgusting, honestly. And if you can do it twice, you can lock it up with a cable lock. You can lock it in a lockbox. You can lock the cable lock around like the stanchion to your seat. So if it's locked twice, nobody's going to take the time to try to get to it. So that's another good way to secure a gun in a car. So
Shannon, I just want to add something, because this is what I remember from one of the Moms Demand Action meetings, and I think it was the sheriff's department that was there, someone from that department. They mentioned about how during sporting events, like a Panthers game or something, how there are individuals that drive up and they have these bumper stickers that say protected by Smith & Wesson. And that's what the people who steal guns, they're looking for those vehicles because they know there's one in there. And I never, and that was interesting because I never thought about that. And then that gets stolen and sold to someone, you know, or whatever. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. So I'm sorry, go ahead, because I know.
Yeah, that's a big problem, getting weapons stolen from vehicles. It's the height of irresponsibility, in my opinion, as a gun owner. You know, if you know you're going somewhere that's a gun-free zone, leave your damn weapon at home. If you can't carry it on your person, keep it at home. That's just my my opinion. But yeah, I agree. That's a huge problem.
So we got S for Be Smart, M.
And then M is modeling the responsible behavior. So, you know, I talk about, my son, I'm a gun owner. I've, as a veteran, had to train on a firing range. But I really love the Boy Scout program. So, of course, they do riflery and Boy Scouts, and it's really about the modeling responsible behavior, like that all, a good trained gun owner would know. Things like you're only going to point the weapon at the target. You always look at what's beyond the target, you use the safety on the gun, those sorts of things. So modeling that sort of behavior. A, like Christian mentioned earlier, is the ask. So this is kind of the culture change where we try to get people to just be comfortable with the conversation. Like, do you have a gun in the house, and how is it stored? And I've been to some great events recently where we'll give out the, the cable locks. I'll have conversations with a lot of new gun owners. And when you mention it, they're like, oh, wow, I do have a kid in the house. They just haven't put 2 and 2 together. And when they do, they're like, yeah, I really don't want my 3-year-old to handle the weapon, right? And now this is going to deter a 3-year-old, but maybe not a high schooler. A teenager might get a little crafty. So, you need to up your game on safe storage in that case. But talking to Larry Hyatt at Hyatt Guns, he has told me that this 2020 was a banner year for sales, and we heard that nationally. And he said, yeah, he concurs. And I asked him, he said most of his gun sales this year have been to Black women. So there's a lot of new gun owners out there. And so we just want to educate folks that if you've got a weapon in your house, you need to consider, and it's not just kids. And although the program is designed to teach, adults how to keep weapons safe from children, it can apply to anybody in your family. You know, anybody that's maybe in a crisis situation, or maybe you have an elderly parent living with you, or, you know, that comes to visit, or maybe an elderly parent that has dementia issues that might not need to have access to a weapon in their own home. So just, you know, teaching folks to keep them locked up securely. The R is the recognizing the role of guns in suicide. So as we mentioned, you know, 2/3 of all gun deaths are, you know, firearm suicide. And actually the demographic that's the highest is white men over 60. So you'll see that in a lot of, like, some of the kind of Midwest rural states have a huge problem, like Missouri, with firearm suicide, because they have a huge population with access to weapons. They've got more lax laws about registrations and sales and such. So that's a, you know, a problem nationally, and veterans as well, and the LGBTQ community are more disproportionately affected by firearm suicide. And then the T is just the tell. That's just like, you know, tell two friends and they'll tell two friends. And we just want to make these conversations just normal, right? We talk about taking the keys when someone, you know, has had too much to drink. Let's talk about, like, how are you securing your weapons? Are you doing it in a responsible way? And, you know, if I'm going to be visiting your house, or my kids are going to be in your house, you know, just please keep them locked up.
And I think that's one of the saddest things ever, is how bad the NRA has missed their ability to educate people. Kind of like the Dairy Farmers Association, you know, doing the Got Milk, you know, campaign to get people to drink milk, and you know, Texas did the just click it or get a ticket, or just don't mess with taxes, the anti-littering campaign. The NRA could have done such a campaign and made some catchy sayings, and it works. You know, it's part of education, is seeing the people that are the most involved, that have the most skin in the game, actually jump into the fight. And the NRA so much could do better on general population education. I know they're involved in a lot of gun ranges and inside the gun owner community, but what you really need is that bigger stage where you have the casual gun owner that just wants to protect their house. And interesting that you said that Black female gun owners, it's increasing. They're actually they are the highest rate. They're the highest percentage per capita to get murdered by a romantic partner. And so and women in general are disproportionately murdered by romantic partners, and again, because there's a lot of discretion on protection orders, for example. There's a lot of issues in that, and that was another thing that Kyle and I talked about, is changing, making sure that judges and attorneys are more accountable for protection orders, that if they're going to gamble with somebody's life and not do a protection order, but they're held accountable on the back end of that. So, and that's very, very important, is ending the discretion of judges.
Yeah, that plays into the qualified immunity issue, because the reason why they can't be held accountable is because of qualified immunity. And that's another thing. Lucille brought that up, and that disgusting judicial policy in this country needs to go away. You know,
let me jump in just 2 seconds, because we are going to run over just a little bit, and we do value everyone's time. And I want to thank everyone who is on here and is talking about this, and also those who'll be watching us later and listening. I want to bring Lucille in on this also, because I as I'm listening to everyone, I'm putting my Jenny James Gunn hat on, and I'm not sure that's always good. By the way, I love your Texas thing there, or whatever, that's nice. So
yippee-ki-yay.
Yes. So I want to, what I'm thinking is, I can see how it's difficult for this issue to really gain momentum in Black and brown communities. And the reason is because if I was a member of someone who was against, let's say against it, but, you know, like, let's say NRA, because that's just the figure that we're using for, you know, passing legislation, whatever.
Yeah, they're the boogeymen for good reason.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the
And so-
NRA is a disgusting, corrupt organization that's only in the pocket of the big gun manufacturers, and they don't need to exist. There are much better organizations out there who actually seek to educate Americans on their civic responsibility. Yeah, I get you.
Well,
I don't like the NRA, by the way.
Yeah, well, okay. How do you feel, Stephen? So all I would have to do from a strategic and talking point thing is go to Black and brown communities and say, what are these mom demand action people? And I'm saying this because I know Shannon, and I don't think she would take offense to this, but I would say, what are these moms demand action, or, you know, are this every town USA? What do they know? They're just a bunch of rich white suburban women who have time to get the lock and do this kind of stuff. And they don't really understand what we face. I'm talking, you know, kind of in that, what we face in our communities where, you know, it's different. And so I do see that as the one, not flaw, but that is the one thing that I could see how Black and brown communities sometimes may not understand how this impacts our community also. Because if you're like a Second Amendment kind of person, you use these gaslight words like Chicago, you know, do we want to become a Chicago? Do we want to become a Detroit? Those are code words for, do we want to be like those people, the Black and brown people? You know, do we really want to be, if we did this, we would turn into one of those. You know, Charlotte uses it all the time. Do we want to be like Atlanta? You know, that's code for, do we want to be browner and blacker? That's really what that means. And so those are things that are used, those kind of like buzzwords are used. And so I'm interested to hear what Lucille has to say, not that this has come from her or anything, but from, and maybe even Mama Ruth, from the Black and brown community. How do you feel about this conversation? And I know we don't have time to talk about everything, but how do you feel about gun sense and data or whatever? Lucille, let's let you go first. And then, because we don't have a lot of time left, we're just going to go over just a little bit.
No, we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
And this conversation right here would be totally different if this panel was Black or brown. I'm sitting here listening to all of this and I'm like, okay, first of all, if you look at the statistics of African Americans, Black or brown people actually committing suicide, that would be slim to none unless it was accidental. So when we're talking about gun control and gun safety and all that stuff in the African American community, when you talk about, we listening to rap music, I mean, it's just totally different from, you know, our aspect as to where all this violence and things like that is coming from. When Mom Demand Action, when my son was first murdered, I actually joined Mom Demand Action under Christy Clark's leadership, and it was great. But going there was no Black and brown people in there. When here in Charlotte, until the UNCC mass killing, we hadn't had that situation. And that's basically what Moms Demand Action focused around. So I tried to, you know, incorporate, you know, the homicides and the things like the killing, shootings and the guns here in Charlotte. And it was like, I'm putting my fingers in my ear because that's not what Mom Demand Action focus is. But when Christy left, she was like, we need to get more Black people, Black and brown people, African Americans, whatever you want to call it, into the room, because these are the people who is most affected here in Charlotte. So they were looking for actual leadership here in Charlotte to be able to do that. And Christy recommended me. And not to downplay Moms Demand Action and what they do, but I thought I had one of the most racist experience with that, because then it was like, oh no, we don't want only one leader, we're going to have co-leaders here, we want more than one leader because one leader can't do it. So they still overlooked me as even one of the co-leaders. One of the ladies that was in there, Rebecca, she didn't even want to do it at all. She kept saying, no, let Lucille do it. No, let Lucille do it. But I think the pink elephant in the room is because I was Black. So I withdrew from Moms Demand Action because of the experience that I had when they was having meetings. You know, maybe I was included and maybe I wasn't, even as a co-leader. But the conversation, again, to bring it back to here, this conversation to me was so white, because this is not what's happening in the Black community. And it was kind of frustrating for me to sit here and listen to that, because you're not going to go to a Black kid and say, hey, let me talk to you about this. Put the guns down. They're going to probably slap the mess out of you and probably shoot you, because hell, they don't want to hear that. That's not the way you come to them. You know, I have a bullet on my chest and it has my son's ashes in it. And that's a great conversation starter. And I know we short on time in the Black community. And also, when my son was murdered, I was able to stand over him before the police got there, and take pictures of my son. And I showed these Black kids in my community, or whenever I'm talking to them, and say, this is what happens when you actually pull the trigger. Because once they pull the trigger, they run away and they don't see what happened. The next thing they know, the victim is all cleaned up, or they don't ever see them again. And this put something else in their mind to say, hey, and tears falling from their eyes. You know, you're right. I don't want to see this. And I let them know that my son is not hurting no more. Once you pull a trigger, that person don't hurt, but that mother, that family, that's who hurts. So it's a whole different conversation. This is a whole different conversation when it comes to talk about decreasing gun violence in the Black community, because we're not mass shooting. When do you see Black people mass shooting? Going shooting up a school or anything. You look at the Bobby McKeithen situation. He went to that school with a gun and he shot who exactly was doing something to him. Not the school. He didn't shoot up the school. So again, the conversation is totally different in Black and Brown community, for Black and Brown people. And I'll let that be right there.
Thank you, Lucille, for sharing that. And I just, full disclosure, I want to let you know that Shannon, she's with Moms Demand Action. She's not all of Moms Demand Action. So, and I know that Shannon is very involved and does things, but it was interesting to hear that kind of perspective, and because that's kind of that's kind of what I was kind of hearing. I don't necessarily know. There's so much great work that Moms Demand Action does, and just groups like that. But in Charlotte, it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like there's the willingness to understand other. I didn't even know how to describe
Not
it. It's
everybody's
like,
on the table. That's
yeah,
what happens.
yeah, that's right. There's not everyone at the table, and
different communities have different needs, different
Yes.
pressures, different experiences. And so the approach, if you're going to have to use a buzzword, a holistic approach, you have to have tailored solutions. So in the chat, I mentioned this. There's an organization started by a great libertarian, Maj Touré from Philly. And it's about, it's called Black Guns Matter. And it's about harm reduction, conflict resolution, and teaching people about their rights as it pertains to the Second Amendment. And he goes all across the country and he talks, he does like gun classes and Second Amendment classes in the in these communities that suffer from this sort of epidemic or this endemic violence. And it's all about teaching people about responsibility, how to handle your business, right? How to talk people down from a situation instead of just immediately going for the gun. I mean, and he's an interesting character. I mean, very homespun, like very down to earth, as he would say, kind of street. And he does it much better than I do. And I'll put the link for his page in there, but they do classes and stuff. And they do really good work about, even getting gangs to put down their guns and their grievances aside. It's really incredible.
Thank you, Stephen. And we could go on for a long time with this, and we could have like different segments of it and so forth. But Be Smart is an important. And I know I'm sorry, Shannon, we weren't able to kind of believe there's SMART, and it's an acronym. There's cards that you can carry around, and I will even I acknowledge when I go to the moms or when I visit the moms in action, I know that there is a certain demographic that goes to those meetings, and they talk to a certain demographic. And I know that, and I think it's important, and I'm in many ways I'm happy that demographic is involved in trying to make the change. But I also understand, because many of us walk in so many different other circles, that I also understand that it doesn't address some of the issues that maybe Lucille was talking about, or even if that group can even do that, or what the case may be. But I do think that this is such a big deal. Our gun violence epidemic is that's one of the reasons I'm wondering why it's never been addressed, is because it's just
not about not having organizations talking about them. It's the issue of how we see, even in the government, even in our city. The city wants to hold some meetings, and they want the community to come and approach to them instead of the opposite. We have to learn as an organization, if we want to change a mentality, we have to move on forward and go to those neighborhoods, go to those HOAs or any, families or whatever, whoever's willing to open up the doors and have those conversations. Hear them first, hear their needs, hear what's going on. I, as a Latina, as a brown color, there's a lot of things that y'all don't know about me. My brother was murdered at the age of 23. My oldest brother was murdered in LA. And it's been painful, like Lucille said. My brother is in peace already, but my family has suffered all these years because we can't get over it. One of my younger brothers, younger than me, playing with a gun, he shot his own self in a leg because he didn't have no education, and he was hanging out with the wrong kids and stuff. Things like those. People don't understand what's going on this side of the yard. People don't know what we go through. Violence calls violence. Yes, Lucille mentioned you don't see black or brown going in to do massive shootings, but hey, they want to protect themselves because they've seen what's going on out there. They don't know any other way but protecting themselves, and that's how they end up in those dark holes of buying in the black market, bad guns, illegal guns, stealing them, because they want to feel protected, because they feel rejected. They feel like everybody, all the eyes are against them. They feel like they're being the target. So they want to make sure that they're protected and they're protecting their family. But if we don't take the first step in going to those neighborhoods and say, hey, you know what? I'm white, but I'm here to let you know that, we understand your situation. We understand your family matters. We understand how you feel, and we want to bring that change. Are you willing to change? Are you willing to open up your ears? Are you willing to kind of unite with me and let's make a change? Then we will start seeing some changes.
So if I could just address real quick. So Lucille's comments are absolutely warranted. And but I feel like this really speaks to a larger problem, like where we're not talking with each other the right way or connecting, because we have had, particularly women of color come to our meetings, and I know we've reached out a lot, and and I've had conversations with Latinx community members that have come to our meetings, but then it never goes any further. So I don't know what's wrong. Like, what have we said wrong? We are actually focusing on trying to work on the city gun violence problem in Charlotte, because we realize that, yes, the mass shootings get a lot of media attention, but really where the violence is happening is at the city level, and it's in a zip code level. So, we're actually kind of on the sidelines working with the city of Charlotte with their Safe Charlotte process in that whole Beatties Ford Road area. That's not getting any attention, but and I guess, and maybe one of the strengths of Moms Demand Action is a lot of white women that can organize, and they can bring a lot of resources, and maybe they're not the ones to be out on the street, because, we have gotten out there. We've partnered with Heal Charlotte and tried to get into the communities, but I'm not sure we're always welcomed. And or invited back, I should say. So I feel like there's a disconnect there, and we need to be educated on what we can be doing better. Because I think that the inspiration is there and the goodwill to make a change. We just need to know how to do that better.
Exactly, Shannon, and I totally understand. And like I said, my organization is Take Back Our Hoods. And I have 3 phenomenal Caucasians who walk with me. We walk every other week. And I did the candlelight for Joe Odom the other night. They come proudly with they Take Back Our Hood hoodies on, and just totally forget about the color there. And people, you know, at first they kind of reserved about, okay, why are these white people here? Why are they, you know, doing this in the Black community? Why are they walking? We had a African-American first Black History Parade along Bettisford Road a couple of weeks ago, and they was front and center. You know, we have to kind of take the Black and white out of it. We need our white counterparts to be there to help and participate in our activities, but they don't need to be per se the lead. You know, we need them to have these conversations. I'm trying to get into a lot of our Caucasian communities to be able to really have an open, you know, dialogue about, you know, the race issues, the gun violence, the homelessness, instead of feeling like you only inviting me in to be sympathetic. Because like you say, you do have Black people that may come to these meetings, but when we talk about, you know, the leadership role, I was talking about, okay, you know, do you have an African American that's actually leading Moms Demand Action? No. All the faces of Moms Demand Action is pretty much Caucasian. So, you know, when you talking about going into the Black community, you sometimes, yes, y'all money sometimes go further than ours. You know, be part of the resource, but not have to be per se the face, because when you go into these communities, they're looking for people who look like them. That's why when I ran for mayor, you know, they wanted me to dress up, put these suits on, and, you know, you have candidates that's going in these fabulous cars and things like this. No, I'm a part of this community. I'm gonna have my jeans on. I'm gonna have my hoodies on, my hoodies. I'm not gonna have slacks and heels on. But they tell me that that's okay in the Black community, but that's not okay in the white community. I would never draw those votes, and Black people don't vote as much as the Caucasians. So I'm stuck kind of between a rock and a hard place. And I would love to have you as a part of, to join, you know, partnership with Take Back Our Hoods. You know, I have a Zoom meeting every Friday night to talk about just these experiences where you could put your real voice, your real feelings on the table, to be white, to be Black, or whatever it is. And your opinion will be respected, because then and only then, with the open dialogue, where we will understand where each other is coming from, to be able, you know, to work together. And one more thing before I wanted to apply, and I'm still working on it even today, on that Cure Violence grant. But they make those requirements and those qualifications to be able to get that money so hard for organizations like mine that's out here on the ground, that's actually doing the work. It's all a setup. It's all about, you know, just like they got Greg Pips back on that city, you know, they had so many people applying, but they knew who they wanted to put in that position. They got so many people in organizations that don't even qualify. And it's not even out here on the ground to apply for that Cure Violence grant to get that money. But organizations such as mine that's out here doing the work, doing exactly what Cure Violence is doing, because I don't have that 501c3 with a bunch of money in the bank to be able to say, you know, fund it or show where I could fund it. Hell, if I had the money in the bank, I wouldn't need the money from the city in the first place.
Yeah, that's that Lucille, I didn't mean to laugh, but that is yes, that is the interesting thing about in many of our communities, when we're going out to ask for loans, and we say, if we had the money, we wouldn't need the loan. I mean, it's just like this catch-22 kind of. I understand what you were saying there, And we do have to end the show, but before we end, I do want to just ask Dr. Bohmfalk something, because I appreciate Dr. Bohmfalk, Dr. B, you being on this call. And I know how there's a lot of things that are you're spending your time with and so forth. In 37 seconds, how does the gun violence epidemic relate to Medicare for all?
That's interesting. I really hadn't thought about that specifically. I don't have a good ready 30-second answer for you, other than uninsured people who are victims of gun violence wouldn't be saddled with multi-$1,000 bills for getting their gun shots treated, and then have to declare bankruptcy. So to that extent, that would be kind of a good thing, and that would be a good thing for the racial disparities too, because since the majority who are thus victimized in gun violence tend to happen in colored communities. So.
Yeah, well, I was just everything that we've talked about, we've been able to kind of pivot a little bit, so that way Steve can shake his head whenever we've been able to talk about Medicare for all.
The bottom line is Medicare for all will solve something for everyone.
Yes. So all right, Steve.
So we're getting rid of certificate of need.
That's right. That's right. Well, listen, we're going to end the show, because I know we could be talking for a long time, and I value everyone's time. I know you have things to do. I'm so grateful that we've had the ability to talk about this. At least we're having this conversation. And that was the whole reason that we do this show, so we can have this conversation with individuals. Sometimes they're not always comfortable, but it's important that we have these conversations with each other. And as a community, as Charlotte, we, especially with COVID, we many times don't have the ability to go and look at other people's points of view and so forth. And we've just got to do that, because we're not going to move anything forward unless we bring everyone to the table. And what that means is, and I learned this in 2020, and I'm trying to practice it in 2021, even though it's hard, thanks from the guidance of Jenny James Gunn. Sometimes you just have to shut up and just let other people lead. And I don't mean this with being mean, but sometimes those groups in power have to just go to other groups and help them and say, let me walk with you. Just let me help you, and just let them do the work. And I get the sense, I'm not sure that was what Lucille was talking about, but sometimes we need groups like Moms Demand Action to help us. But we don't want you to tell us how to do it. We just want you to walk with us, just like we're asked to walk with you. Sometimes we just need you just to be there, just to walk with us, and just the strength of that. And I've joked with Barbara, and Barbara's not on here. If I ever have a rally or in Charlotte, I want white women at the rally, because what I've learned about white women rallies is the police never bother you. Never. No, and I'm being very serious. I was at a white women's rally and it was an abortion, I think, a reproductive rights rally in front of the government center. And there were anti-protester abortion people walking through, and these white women, older white women, were ripping the signs down and doing this. And the police just stood there. And I thought to myself, if this had been a black and brown group, the police would have been like knocking everyone over, and they didn't want the optics of knocking some people perceived, whatever. And so, quite honestly,
we got a big dose of that on January 6th, didn't we?
Yeah. Yes. And so, just having, there is.
And you're exactly right,
Yeah.
Christian, and that's why I said, the white people to be able to join forces with us, because a lot of our marches and rallies, the white took the front line, because the police wasn't going to shoot those rubber bullets and things like that at them, and we was protected. So there's a way that we have to be able to really join forces and connect to bring about these changes that we want to see.
Yes, ma'am. So with that said, I'm going to shut up, as Jenny tells me. Let's go around the pretty much screen And thank you, Shannon, so much for being on. Please come on anytime you want. We will dedicate a whole show about being smart. And I'll mute Stephen the whole show and me the whole show. And sorry, Stephen. We know we love you, Stephen. And Brady Brent Screen, Bertie, he's there. Stephen, Jenny, Dr. B, Mama Ruth, Shannon, and Lucille, please tell us where you're going to be in 30 seconds, and then we'll end the show.
I'm Stephen DiFiore. I'm just going to be working, and then it's convention season for the Libertarian Party, so I'm doing work with that. And I will say this, even though I am dead set against gun control for a lot of reasons, I do like the fact that we can have these conversations and that a lot of different people and a lot of different groups all want the same thing in the end, which is less violence, less heartbreak, and to boost our communities. And so I am willing, able, and eager to work with everybody on this panel or anyone watching for the things that we can work together on to make our communities safer so that more people can have a full and flourishing life, the full and flourishing life that they deserve. And as Americans, when we come together across race lines, across class lines, across ideological and religious lines, we can accomplish anything. And so I'm a big fan of unity, coming together and working together to make our communities better. I'm more of a bottom-up kind of guy. And with that, I'll stop.
Way too many jokes there. Everybody have a great week. I'm going to be at a Pride meeting tonight. We've already started our organizational meetings, and I'll be working, obviously, and all that. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
Thank you.
My big thing I'm looking forward to this week, now that the CDC has approved it, is hugging my children and grandchildren here in town. It's been over a year since I've touched them, and
Wow.
really looking forward to that. Yeah.
Are you going to pinch their cheeks?
They're little behinds. And then they'll knock me down because they're bigger than I am already.
Sorry, next person, sorry.
I need a grandpa. I'll be at home. Guys, don't forget, tomorrow we have a special edition for Coffee and Pan Dulce. We'll be hosting a tribute to our fellow early gone Joe Olson. I get confused with his last name, but we sure miss him. And I'll be here at home the rest of the week. So I'm still supporting our fellows down in Texas. I'll be wearing my mask, and I don't want them to do what they're being told to do the right thing for their lives and run for their life and do the right thing for safety.
Good. Shannon?
Oh, Shannon.
Good.
Hey, I'm not sure I can say it any better than Stephen. That was amazing. But yeah, actually when I get off this call, I'm going to make a list of all the fun stuff I'm going to do when my kids spend more time in school in the very near future. And part of that's going to include actually putting together a plan for Be Smart, because last month we got our heads together and brainstormed about 1,000 different organizations that we want to talk to and people that we want to reach out in the community, and just kind of putting it all together into a plan for 2021. I actually feel like we've turned the tide on gun violence in this nation, and we are headed in a good direction to start reducing those numbers. So I'm looking forward to that. Thanks for inviting me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And Miss Lucille?
Well, I won't be sitting in this car all weekend. You see my heart below. Right now, I'm going to go back in and I'm going to finish working on this cure violence grant, and hopefully fiscal agent will come along before I have to turn in this grant tomorrow, because we're doing all the right things in this community and we need to be funded so we can continue the work and decrease these homicides and things like that in our city of Charlotte. So wherever I'm just wherever is needed this weekend in Charlotte. I'm just out in the streets.
Well, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Christian Cano. I didn't say my buttons were Medicare for All. I want to personally thank, like with everyone else, Congresswoman Alma Adams from the 12th Congressional District for signing on to the new Medicare for All bill in the House of Representatives. We knew she would, but thank you for doing that. That takes a lot of leadership and courage. And my other one was Moms Demand Action. I'm, you know, they do some great work, and I want to thank you, Shannon, for being here. And I know it's the group has so much, it's done so well, and there's so much more they can do. And like any group, we love you so much that we want you to keep succeeding. So we want to give you advice. So.
Hey, before we leave, I
Yes.
want to give thanks to our audience and
Yes.
those that commented.
Yep.
Cindy Lopez, all the way to Texas. Thank you for
Mhm.
supporting us and, you know, keeping us in cheers. Also, Sean Thompson, thank you. Yes, we have the band back. Thank you, Jenny. And also, Grace McLean. I'm assuming she's with the Moms Demand
Yes.
Action.
Mhm.
And thanks for all your comments. We are keeping them there and share them with our community. So thank you. And I think that's about it. And Stephen, of course, thanks for your comments as well. Keeping
Yes.
the conversation.
So just two quick things and we're going to sign off. First thing, I just want to remind everyone that tomorrow our CMP Coffee and Paducah family made a decision to try our best in our own little way to honor our good friend and neighbor, Joel Oldham, who passed away at such a young age, but made a huge impact on the city of Charlotte. But also, I think I can speak for me in my life as well. Joe was on our show 11 times. I went through all 700 minutes of the time he was on our show and tried to edit some things down, and we were able to get it down to 65 minutes. And we're just going to play a 65-minute video tribute to him tomorrow evening at 9 p.m. And then we will share if we want to share. If not, we don't have to say anything of from when he first started talking on our show, and he didn't stop until he stopped. And as I've watched it, and which is why I have these bags under my eyes trying to edit it, it was just amazing that this young man, the things that he said, you could see our faces when he was talking. We were like, wow, this he spoke truth to power and was just it was just amazing. And his legacy will continue to live on. And, you know, we do not have any intention to, I'm sure his family is grieving, and we wanted to do our little part. And there's many other people who will be giving him tributes, but our tribute was specifically to Joel being on our show and the impact that he's made. He taught all of us, or I can speak for myself a lot. So if you do have time to join us tomorrow evening, we'd be happy to. If not, you can watch that video on YouTube afterwards when we drop it after the show. And I also want to thank everyone who is on here. When we watch this show, I see us on Zoom, but we also see us on Facebook Live as well. And I can see everyone who's suffering from allergies. And it is, it's
Another hot tea.
Yes. So thank y'all for surviving the show with allergies, because I think everyone's going to be like this for the next 3 months. So once again, thank you so much for joining us on Coffee and Paducah. We'll see you next week when our topic is, by the way, spring cleaning, spring clean Latinx hate, how transphobia. We will be talking about a topic that we'll be talking about that topic next week on how to deal with transphobia in our Latinx community. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week on Coffee and Paducah.
Latinos love clutter.
Bye.